Thank you, Ron. Budjirigamaru, everyone. G'day and welcome. My name is Craig Madden, and I'd like to start by thanking the Infrastructure Sustainability Council for inviting me here today to welcome you on the country. I'm a proud Bundjalung Gadigal man from the Eora Nation, and Gadigal land is the land on which we're standing here today. Jinyura Gadigal. This land is Gadigal. It is customary for Aboriginal people to invite guests or visitors onto our land or country, offering you safe passage as you pass through our lands. It's a practice that we've been doing for thousands of years. So as a representative of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council and a proud Gadigal man, I'd like to welcome you all onto Gadigal land, Aboriginal land. I'd like to pay my respects to our elders, past, present and future, and acknowledge the stories and traditions and living cultures of our Aboriginal people on this land. To any Aboriginal people, if we have any people from the Torres Strait Islands, welcome. To any guests, to all our non-Aboriginal guests today, a warm and sincere welcome to Gadigal land, Aboriginal land. Our Gadigal clan is one of the 29 clans which make up the Eora Nation. It's a nation that's bound by 3 distinct landmarks. So we've got the Hawkesbury River up to the north, the Nepean River out to the west, and the Georges River down to the south. Within the boundaries of those mighty rivers lie the Eora Nation, the land of our Gadigal people, one of the many clans of that nation. If we have any guests from across the seas, from across our great country, great state of this magnificently not so beautiful city today, but it is a beautiful and we love her. City of Sydney, welcome. I hope you all enjoy the conference today. On behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council and its members, please stay safe. I hear there's some horrid weather coming this afternoon. Stay safe on your travels. And once again, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Well, welcome to the premier event for sustainable infrastructure. Apart from the short one-day conference in May last year, this conference is even more exciting as we haven't been able to meet this way since 2019. I'd like to thank the platinum sponsor, Transport New South Wales. Transport for New South Wales' role is to lead the development of a safe, efficient, integrated transport system, keeping people and goods moving while connecting communities and shaping the future of our cities, centres and regions. I'd also like to welcome everybody online. Now, there were some people who were coming from Queensland and unfortunately they weren't able to make it for the obvious reasons, and we feel for them, both in Queensland and New South Wales, about what's happening there. But I'd like to thank the live stream partner, Autodesk. Autodesk is a leader in 3D design, engineering and entertainment software. From blockbuster visual effects and buildings that create their own energy to electric cars and the batteries that power them, the work of the 3D software customers is everywhere you look. I'd also like to acknowledge the conference charity, Talent Beyond Boundaries. They match skilled refugees with companies in need of their skills. Employers gain valuable talent, and displaced people have a chance to rebuild their careers and their lives. This is the Council's annual contribution to STG 1 and 2, with their daily work delivering on 15 of the other 17 goals. Alignment of our event with the STGs, this venue was chosen for its 6 Green Star rating building and awarded Best Sustainable Venue. The menu chosen features mostly plant-based and low-emissions ingredients and directly aligning with the SDG goals of 11 sustainable cities and communities and 12 responsible consumption and production. We have 2 fully packed days. Please note that the 2 one-hour breaks each day have been designed as networking and refreshment sessions. Alternatively, you may like to attend a spotlight session in the Signorelli room, stretch your legs, enjoy the food and learn something new from other exhibitors. The choice is yours. But before I begin for the first day, I just want to point out a couple of housekeeping matters. The restrooms, the main restrooms are in this area, and there are some other restrooms in that area there. In the unlikely event of the alarms going off, sound like a Qantas steward, we'll all head out into the green piece of land on the other side of the area there, and hopefully it won't be raining if we do. The first day is all in this room with 4 sessions. The first, launch of the Thriving Nations report. Second, the culture is old, infrastructure is young, Indigenous perspectives. The third, the war for talent. and the fourth, impact innovations. Day 2 is split between the two main plenary rooms and the park view room, please. Pardon me. The first is the launch of the place-based approaches to reaching net zero, value in a circular economy, innovation and local procurement central to sustainable supply chain, the rising tide of sustainability, water sector transformation, place-based approaches to reach net zero, climate and nature in concert, mitigating modern slavery risks, technology-enabled sustainable infrastructure, financing sustainable and impactful infrastructure, transforming energy, and contractual alignment for sustainability. It's a lot of programs, but great programs, and I'm sure you'll enjoy them all. Q&As throughout the day. If you have any questions for the speakers or panelists, enter them into the chat function on the app. These will then be sent to the moderator. I'd like to introduce Greaves, the ISC's Learning and Development Manager, to the stage to take you through that particular. And I can't. Oh, there you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hayley.
Thank you.
Good.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see that so many of you could join us in person today. Before we get started, just like to introduce our event app. This event app has everything you need in there, including the agenda, all of the speakers. You can see all of our attendees. But my favorite part of the app is the real-time interactions. You can be involved in whether you're in the room or joining us virtually. All you need is your phone, so if you wouldn't mind just getting your phone out right now. You will see on the screen that there's a QR code. Feel free to scan that. It will bring the app up, or go to your emails, and yesterday you would have received a reminder email from events@IS Council. And in there's lots of instructions, but don't worry, I'll go through them. If you can't locate the email or for some reason the QR code isn't working, just come see me after and I'll help you get set up. So whether you've scanned the QR code or you found the relevant link in the email, you'll be taken to either the App Store or Google Play. Download the app that is called Events Air. It's got a blue background. I see some nodding. Have we found it? Might take a moment to download, but once you've downloaded that, you need to enter the events code. The events code, I believe, is on the screen there. ReConnect attendee app. And you should be in. One final step. When you're in there, you will need to enter your email address that you use to register for this event. So mine was hayley.greaves@iscouncil.org. And then there will be a small space for a unique access code. That unique access code is in your email. If you are unable to locate the email or you don't have access, come find me after and I will find your unique access code for you. And then you're in. Once you're in there, you will see my photo. Not my photo. A little thumbnail for your photo. So go in there and upload your headshot so that everyone knows who you are and how to find you. You will also see a little attendees thumbnail. So you can scroll through our attendee list and see who's here, find anybody that you would specifically like to network with. Hunt them down throughout the day, especially if they've got their headshot on there. Make it a lot easier for people to find you. You can see all of our sponsors in there as well, so have a look through all of our amazing sponsors. And you'll see all of our speakers in there also. The agenda app, that's where you can see the full program. And once you're in the full program, you can click into each session. This is where it becomes a little bit more interactive. So in each session, you'll be able to take part in any polls, live Q&A, as mentioned, and a forum where you can network or discuss any topics with other attendees. And remember, it's both virtual and online. As mentioned, if you have any issues, please come see me over at the ISC training booth, and I'll help you get all set up. Thank you.
Not straight away. I'm sure half the room would be going in that direction. Thanks, Ainsley. I just also want to mention some sponsors, our gold sponsors, BlueScope, Lang O'Rourke, John Holland Group, and GHD. Obviously, without the support of all our sponsors, this event wouldn't be on, so I'd like to thank them. I'd now like to introduce Ainsley Simpson, the CEO for Infrastructure Sustainability Council. Ainsley has been the CEO for the Council since 2018. Ainsley is an accessible leader, a catalyst for positive change. She is committed to making a real impact for organisations that anchor in their core values, develop their people, and support the advancement of women with leadership aspirations. Ladies and gentlemen, Ainsley Simpson.
Thank you, Ron. Bujiri Gamarua. Tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone. Namaste, ni hao, hola. Kamatsu, ciao, assalamu alaikum. Hi, sabona, dumela. Guten Tag, buenos dias. Bonjour, martin ba, et dobry den. From our mob to yours, welcome. A big thank you to Uncle Craig, who's probably already left us, for the warm welcome to country. I acknowledge the Gadigal people and the deep connection you have to land, water and culture. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. If you have not done so already, please greet the two people next to you in the way that you culturally identify. Well, that should have certainly got you warmed up. I appreciate it's been a while since we all came together, so there is a lot to share. That's always a great way to get started. Or continue. Thank you. Welama. Welama is the Gadigal word for return or to come back. So Welama to ReConnect, March 2022. ReConnect is our first major conference in almost 2 years. It's our opportunity to recharge, reconnect and reinforce with purpose and with people. This year's theme is positive and it is action-oriented. A decade of opportunity for people, planet and the economy. For many people in this room, it has been a very long time since we've seen one another, and for some of you, the very first time that you're meeting in 3D. I sincerely hope that the next 2 days provides you with some respite and even some renewal and revitalisation. I do want to acknowledge our virtual audience, those that we were expecting, our whānau joining from Aotearoa, New Zealand, kia ora koutou, and kaya to our friends over in WA, and as Rod mentioned, also to you in Queensland who perhaps can't be here even though you'd planned to. A very special thank you to all of our sponsors. Making coming together possible is only done through partnership, and a very hearty thank you to our long-standing member, early adopter and platinum sponsor, Transport for New South Wales. Also, an incredible thanks to Transurban for hosting one of our most spectacular site visits yesterday. Even more remarkable thanks to the rain. We're delighted to be launching 2 solution-seeking papers at this year's conference. Thriving Nations with our thought leadership, or at least our knowledge partner, Urbis, and a place-based approach to net zero with our knowledge partners, McDonald's. We'll all go through the finish line tomorrow when many of you join us for the Gala Awards. Seasons change and so do we. This next century is going to be one of change. Globally, there have been simultaneous crises which signal this. COVID, climate change, social injustice, destabilizing geopolitics. These are going to be with us for a while. They are not short-lived, and in their wake they will leave devastation and destruction. Collectively, they have laid bare inequalities across society, fundamentals like access and quality and economic means. COP26 reinforced the need for positive climate action. In moving to net zero and a positive future, my strongest message is this: it is best not to be myopic. We don't need a microscope on carbon as the only measure and metric. We need binoculars. We need long-sightedness for long-ranging impacts. This involves creating long-term economic opportunities, increased resilience and adaptive capacity, and preparing the workforce through partnership for a just transition, all the while protecting and regenerating our natural ecosystems. More locally, we're all under the pump readying to deliver a once-in-a-generation pipeline of infrastructure investment. And we're all bracing for the productivity multiplier of the infrastructure-led recovery, one that should be marked by sustainable infrastructure. Because as leaders, you should not be championing anything less. And it's quite the same for the Infrastructure Sustainability Council. In the last 12 months, we have announced our new brand, released version 2.1 of the rating scheme, launched a refreshed and enhanced impact report, invested in our board, our team, our organisation, so we are better able to support and serve our members, as well as living our purpose. This year, you're going to see an increased focus from us on decarbonisation, digitisation and diversification. The transition to the Infrastructure Sustainability Council, or the ISC, acknowledges our vision and is deeply aligned to our purpose. The impact that we enable was central to shaping our new identity. We recognise that we operate in countries other than Australia. We want to honour progress and amplify our ability to accelerate change through collaboration. And this means respectfully acknowledging the continued commitments and contributions from our member whānau and stakeholders in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Our brand remains anchored in a circle, now with 4 clear arrows. Each of these are symbolic. The circle represents what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. Because better never stops. It signifies that it is never too late to start, and nor does it matter where you start, only that you get started. And it encourages inclusivity, circularity, and resilience. The 4 arrows represent the opportunities associated with infrastructure, and as all of you know in the room, there are many. The quadruple bottom line: governance, economic, environment, and social. The life cycle of infrastructure: planning, design, construction, and into operations and maintenance. The types of infrastructure: transport, utility, blue, green, and social. And the whole of life benefits delivered: cultural, social, environmental, and economic. Never has there been this collective awareness, this appetite for positive change. There is now a capacity for positive change. This is our decade of opportunity. There is a shift occurring that raises up the importance of legacy and long-term investment, a recognition of the interconnection between the past, the present, and the future, as well as the kinship that we each have with nature and with one another. In the spirit of progress, there is so much to learn. Traditional owners, Maori, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, and Australian Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples all have sacred traditions which honour the responsibility for guardianship of the environment. It is important that this is respected because it delivers intergenerational well-being. And it is with acceptance that this responsibility is taken because it is a shared responsibility. So with this next wave of change, which is largely unknown, what is it that we collectively need to participate in our own rescue and to support one another? So 4 years ago, I stepped into this role, the privilege of leading what is now the infrastructure sector's most strategic asset. I honestly was filled with a combination of excitement and trepidation. And if I'm really frank, at times it was better described as terrified. 2 weeks in, though, I became quite emboldened. I embraced some counsel, which has actually made it into my little black book of tips and tricks. And it was this: the definition of confidence. Confidence is a skill. It is attained through, it is the attainment of an unconscious level of competence that is made possible only with sustained effort and persistent repetition. So 3 days in, there was no successful repetition. There was just relentless but rewarding learning. And maybe 4 years on, there is relentless and rewarding learning. But it was not confidence that I needed. It was courage. And I would say that is probably the same for you. Today we close out and celebrate a decade of determination. A decade made possible through collaboration, co-investment and commitment from across our sector. This week is a significant anniversary. A decade since the Council launched the Infrastructure Sustainability Rating Scheme. At the launch event in 2012, David Singleton, our chair at the time, said this: "We envisage the IS rating scheme will change design, construction and performance of Australia's infrastructure. With a common sustainability framework, investors can begin to quantify ESG aspects of a project or an asset, achieving appropriate value attribution as well as identification of risk and cost reduction." While unable to join us from Melbourne today, David was both respectfully righteous and resoundingly right. Born on the 29th of February 2012, the rating scheme was championed by industry for industry. It was co-funded by government, the private sector and the council as a not-for-profit. It was developed by an interdisciplinary A-team of subject matter experts, and many of you are in the room. And I honour each and all contributors, including those here today, no matter whether you are in the room or online, as well as those past who now walk beside us. Today, over $210 billion worth of infrastructure is under rating. The rating scheme now extends across the full asset life cycle. The performance benchmarks have shifted twice. And the scheme is being deployed across every state and territory in Australia, as well as Aotearoa New Zealand, and is being piloted internationally. It is delivering a compelling return. Economically, the scheme is set to deliver up to $2.40 for every dollar invested. And that is only the monetized value, not the substantial non-financial impact that is created daily. Over a decade, we have collectively invested to create not one, but two unique and strategic assets for the infrastructure sector. The IS Rating Scheme and the Infrastructure Sustainability Council. The purpose of infrastructure is to enable. It enables a vibrant society which is resilient, resourceful and responsible. And the purpose of our sector is to enable infrastructure for people, by people, because infrastructure enables people to thrive. The issues we'll explore over the next 2 days cannot be solved by one person or one organisation alone. It is imperative that we develop the capabilities and the resources to not just focus on what we do, but how we do it and who we do it for, so that we can accelerate our efforts. While this conference is a call to action, it is a call for courage, it is also very firmly a call for collaboration. Today we need to set aside the misnomer that the competition is the peer sitting beside you. The real competition is climate change and rising inequality. The hard reality is that this is a zero-sum game. We either all win or we all lose. So I say this: there is room for everyone at the table. Everyone has a role to play. The faster you share, the more benefits we will reap today and many tomorrows. So you are part of our past, and you are part of our pathway. The Council provides a shared vision and a steady voice, so that together we can walk an uncertain pathway with courage. As your strategic asset, the Council is your catalyst for contribution. It is a catalyst for competitive advantage, and most importantly, it is the catalyst for creating sustainability as the culture of our sector. So from the decade of determination, together we stride into the decade of opportunity. Let it also be the decade of dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ainsley. Now we move into our first session, our decade of opportunity. As Ainsley pointed out, the elements of that opportunity and the challenges that we face. To take that a little bit further, I'd like to introduce to the stage Mr. Rob Sharp. As Secretary of Transport for New South Wales, Rob leads more than 29,000 people dedicated to making New South Wales a better place to live, work and visit. Rob has over 30 years commercial and operational industry experience delivering across transport, infrastructure, technology and engineering operations. He has led large-scale consumer-focused operational businesses and brings a world-class track record to delivering exceptional customer experience and driving digital innovation. Rob Sharp.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and I'm really pleased to be here at this event. Sustainability is just such a passion of mine, and also for transport. And today I just wanted to give you an overview of where we're at, what we're seeing, and I'm really excited by some of the progress that we've been making. We do take a leadership role. We're spending a huge amount of dollars, physical infrastructure that you see around. You can't miss it. Roads, freeways, tunnels, new rail systems. And we have an absolute opportunity here to make a real difference for future generations. Interestingly enough, when I came into transport, one of the things I really that resonated with me is this sense of purpose. So for a government, often you have these great teams that get really passionate about where they're heading and what they do. And for transport, we connect people. We make journeys easier. And ultimately, we're here to make a difference. And that's pretty special to be in an organisation that's actually backing that and actually doing a lot in this space. The infrastructure we deliver is really impactful. It really does change the cityscape, and it impacts on a lot of people's lives quite directly. And what we're doing here on the sustainability space obviously links very, very directly in with this purpose that we have. So that means what we're doing is embedding sustainability into every decision we make. So right across transport, when we're doing our business cases, when we're making key decisions, sustainability is a permanent agenda item through those processes. So whether we're building or operating, we know we make a big impact, and that is a priority for us. Also, it's not just the physical building. We also have the opportunity to influence regulations, and we are also using regulations as part of our endeavour to actually make an impact. In fact, we have a vision. It's very public. You can go online and see it. But in the next 4 years, what we're looking at doing is step changes. So we're focusing in on 5 areas, and those 5 areas are to, I suppose, lift the focus on those and really make a difference. One of those 5 building blocks is sustainability. So we have a specific team and agendas and strategies focused on it. Last year, we issued a sustainability report, and if you haven't seen it, go on and have a look at it. It's a pretty frank document. So we took a pretty open view in terms of where we're at. Warts and all, we've said these are the areas we need to improve on. But more importantly, we set a scene in terms of where we're heading in this space. And we're heading there rapidly. I would also say that whilst you can put a document out and say, yep, look, this is where we can improve, I suppose what I wanted to do is come here and say transport is really serious about this. We're putting a lot into it, and we think as an industry leader, we can really make a difference. And I think all of us individually can make a difference in this space. We've been a strong supporter of Infrastructure Sustainability Council, and in fact we use the ISC rating tool, particularly in our innovative projects, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. But look, for us, we're spending $72 billion over the next 4 years physically building infrastructure. Now you can imagine the sheer quantity of that infrastructure and the impact that that's having in the state of New South Wales. Examples, Sydney Metro, the light rail systems are just some of them. And for those in particular, there's a great sustainability story. A good example is the Sydney Metro City South-West line, and that project is with John Holland, CPB contractors, Gala, and that's achieved the leading infrastructure sustainability design and as-built rating. It's a bit of a tongue twister, that. For the tunnel and station excavation works. Now, it got a score of 96. Now, that's out of 110, and I'm led to believe that's the highest score yet to date. So there's a challenge for you all. You've got to get 97. So, look, for me, that's something to be really proud of. It's just one of those recognitions of the work that goes into some of these items. Now, the high rating has been achieved basically through innovative focus on sustainability, but mainly through collaboration with our industry partners. And I do thank our industry partners who work with us in this space. And to give you an example, we barged 110,000 tonnes of spoil and using 3 tunnel boring machines, and that took 5,000 trucks and truck movements off the congested roads in Sydney. The project's materials footprint reduced by 35%, and the energy-related usage generating greenhouse gases was reduced by 39% if you compared it to a normal base case for this type of work. We've got 19 programs, and we've got 53 ISC ratings in progress. So you can get a sense that we're using this tool to really help our focus in this area. And for us, what it does is it actually provides a structured way of approaching it. And when you're in a large organisation, consistency across the programs and projects we're finding is really important. And it allows you to benchmark and compare relativities, share successes. So we're a big fan. It's also being used at the moment in our Sydney Roads asset performance contracts, and that's for all the maintenance that happens on the roads right across Sydney. We also use it in our transport access program, and so this is about the stations, wharves that we're upgrading, and this is to assist those with disabilities or mobility challenges, and it makes a big difference. Net zero commuter parks, car parks, and we're also doing a lot of work on bridges and road projects, particularly stimulus for the economy off the back of COVID, and a lot of those are also being used with this tool. So I suppose the message is it's not just a particular item. You can see the breadth of where we're using the tool. So it is actually quite flexible, and I certainly suggest you have a look at it if you're not using it. Last year we did release that sustainability plan, and we are looking to deliver substantially on that over the next 12 months. One of the commitments in the sustainability plan was a pathway to net zero, and delivering on, I suppose, the operation of a very heavy infrastructure system, and I'm talking trains, heavy rail, those sorts of things. How do you actually get that to be green? So we've committed to green transport. Now, when New South Wales Government set their fairly ambitious targets, 50% reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050, I was a little concerned because transport in New South Wales actually drives 20% of the emissions. So I've got to halve that, 10% of the state's emissions. So we've got a pretty big goal, and we're up for the challenge. What we are doing, for example, is looking at what's directly in our own control initially. So that's 4% of the state's emissions come directly from trains, buses, and the transport you're very familiar with. We've taken a leadership role in this space, and we wanted to get our own house in order so I could come and talk to events like this and do so authentically, because ultimately I think there's a lot of people who talk about this, but actually delivering is actually quite challenging. And what we did was look at addressing the power usage in particular. So with New South Wales Trains, so all the network that you see is now 100% renewable driven. So every train, platform, the depots, 100% renewable. We're looking at the buses. We've got 8,000 buses. These are diesel or natural gas. And we're just finalising a business case which we'll present to the government on how do we progress the replacement of those buses with electric buses. In fact, while CO2 is one of the drivers, there's actually a lot of health benefits from removing the diesel particulates. And there's also a customer benefit. The customers who go on these electric buses love the quietness, and they're just not noisy. They go through the suburbs and don't leave that noise footprint. So a lot of good reasons to move down that path. We've also got large operations like the Metro. Now there's a large solar farm. They actually 100% renewable as well. So of that 4%, we're very much on the way to delivering on our own emissions. The next challenge is the broader projects, big infrastructure builds, those areas in particular. The other big area that generates a sustainability challenge for us is freight. You're carrying a lot of cargo, very heavy weights, and long distances typically on rail between interstate. Electrifying that is not possible. So we are launching trials of hydrogen. So we're tapping into the trials and projects that are happening down around Wollongong in particular, but also in the Hunter. And how can we actually use hydrogen for trains, and potentially in the longer term for the buses and coaches that do long distance travel. In reality, there's an infrastructure challenge in terms of getting charging stations right through rural Australia. And as a reminder, we are using what I'd call intercity trains. So these are the ones that might go to Newcastle or down the Wollongong. Those trains in particular could also potentially be hydrogen. So it's pretty exciting, very early days for that technology. But as with everything, if you don't actually plan for the future and start working on it, unfortunately, you just don't get there. So it's pretty exciting. The team's working cross-functionally with a lot of other partners on that one. When it comes to delivering infrastructure, we're starting to use the word impactful infrastructure. Now, impactful means it really does make a difference when you focus on those pieces of infrastructure in a broader lens. And we're one of the largest deliverers of infrastructure, in fact, across Australia at the moment. So we have substantial procurement processes that underpin that. And that actually gives us an opportunity to shape procurement, supply chains, and really make a difference. Now, those could be, for example, setting the standards for the infrastructure through the contracts, looking at the supply chain innovations and sustainability that we want to actually put in there in our tenders and actually start getting people tendering for those, and the industry's growing off the back of it. So we are looking at accelerating decarbonisation across the construction sector by building a circular economy. And we're doing this through a sustainable procurement and infrastructure initiative. So this is out there publicly now, and we're looking at actually embedding a lot of this into our contractual arrangements. So by making a commitment to sustainable procurement, what we're thinking we're doing here is actually removing one of the key barriers. Because at the moment, if you're just tendering on price alone, you're going to get the lowest common denominator, and typically that's carbon intensive. So the carbon pricing element is something that you need to think about, and how do you weigh that up in your business case processes. But ultimately, for us, we can improve sustainability through leveraging our procurement and purchasing power. So an example would be, if we do this, we can increase demand for recycled and low carbon materials, and that will actually influence supply chains more generally. We also produce a lot of, say, waste or spoil. So, for example, the large tunnelling machines at the moment, there's a huge amount of sandstone that comes out. What do you do with that? Well, the new second Sydney Airport, their runway base is actually that material. So rather than being wasted, it's gone straight from the underground on a truck out to the airport. So those sorts of things, remove trucks, there's a value proposition associated with it, and massive benefit to the economy. So the commercial elements, the quality of the materials, the technical requirements that underpin procurement, all of those are being worked through and are part of our project phases. So pillar one for this initiative is a mode-agnostic procurement framework, and this is looking at recycle waste and content in all of our infrastructure for the whole of life. And the second pillar of it is digital systems to actually track where the carbon's embedded in all our infrastructure and where it will be released during its life and at end of life. So data is absolutely needed to be able to track and record this. So we've got some pretty ambitious plans here, but we are collaborating across the industry. I've had a lot of meetings myself with senior business leaders, and there's a real appetite, particularly in the construction sector, to start working through real change that will drive these supply chain changes. We've also recently published a discussion paper on the sustainable procurement infrastructure. In fact, it'll be coming out next week. And there's an engagement on it. You can download that as well from our Transport Infrastructure Industry portal. So if you're interested in having a look at that and joining the discussion, please contribute. We do want to hear from you. We're not doing this alone. At the end of the day, there's a whole sector here that if they get with it, we'll be able to pick up a lot, learn a lot and share a lot. We're a government department, so we have a stewardship role, and what we want to do is leave a legacy that says when we're building this infrastructure for future generations, we've done it in a way that is actually for the future generations. And so we're very committed to this. It links back to that purpose that I mentioned earlier. And the other element to achieve this is we've got to actually develop our skill set. There's no doubt that we've done a lot. We've got some very passionate people who have driven us to this point, but we are developing a skills framework right across our project teams in terms of how do you track carbon, how do you become carbon conscious, how do you bring the innovation in at the right times and the right discussions. And we're heading down the path of doing that. We're also looking at a broader set of sustainability. So things like heritage, obviously CO2, net zero, but also broader health benefits that come from what we're doing. So our sustainability proposition's not just CO2, it's much broader than that. We're going to continue to engage through forums like this, meet with our industry partners and keep the conversation going. And we do want to leave a legacy. It's pretty exciting when you think about it that you can actually make a real difference, and the team is really right behind this. So we want to be a leader. We want to build impactful infrastructure and ultimately collaborate with the industry to make a real difference. And I hope you enjoy your conference. It's great to have been able to drop in here and give you an update on what Transport's doing, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Also want to thank Transport for New South Wales as being the Platinum sponsor. It's important that we have them on board and they continue their support. As Rob mentioned, it's something that's important to them. It's obviously important to us as well. Our next keynote presentation will be on thriving in the future. Now, Rob mentioned, of course, the importance of future generations, and it's something obviously we should be looking at. This will be a century of change, as has been mentioned before, and a decade of opportunity to choose a direction that will shape lives positively for generations to come. Our question is, how do we put opportunities for tomorrow into place today, preparing for a workforce with an inherent social conscience? Now, Claire Madden's going to deal with that question. Claire is a leading voice internationally for Generation Z. She is an author, social researcher, keynote speaker, and media commentator. Today, she's going to share why it's important to increase the voice of the younger part of our industry. Ladies and gentlemen, Claire Madden.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, and it is such a joy to be with you in the room. Who's loving being in a room with real people? Not just online, but we also, of course, welcome the people online because it's wonderful that people can join us further abroad than ever before with all the changes and adaptations we've made in the last couple of years. My work is in social research, so we're going to unpack some social trends and demographic change and really understand the emerging generations as customers and how do we prepare for the future. They're an absolutely classic generation, and there's been a whole lot of memes go around, particularly they'll find it's through the pandemic they've found their sense of humour. And we'll just throw up a couple of their memes that they've come up with. Can we all agree that in 2015, not a single person got the answer correct to, where do you see yourself in 5 years from now? Or in 6 years or in 7 years? Probably not in and out of lockdowns with only 3 legal reasons to leave the house and the like. We all learned how to shop differently, how to socialise differently, and there was this one that went around when a man thought he'd wear his gloves while shopping so as to obviously not pick up the virus, only to then remove the glove, put it in his mouth to then use his phone. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a winner. We learned not to drink hand sanitizer, even though it was a suggestion from a particular world leader at one point. And we've changed little behaviours. It's pretty wild how we used to eat birthday cake after someone had just blown all over it. And now, of course, there's just the clapping out the candles. This is the reality of our lives now, isn't it? Is it a Zoom meeting where only audio is required? Or one where we need to look at least respectable for the top half? Similarly, we've had staff working at home, and we too have worked from home. And I think sometimes the expectation is we're one way, and reality is perhaps we're sending those emails from bed. Skipping school for our Gen Zs has changed from what it used to look like, where you would literally leave the school grounds and truant, whereas now it looks something more like this, or it has through the lockdowns anyway. Or some kids were very creative and they created a video of themselves looking like they were listening and just like this, and then put it on loop. So in their Zoom classes it looked like they were there. And I think credit to them. Hey, they're learning different skills perhaps than what the teacher wanted, but innovative nonetheless. There was another kid who was quite switched on and did this maths quiz. There are 26 kids at the beach then, 37 more kids come. How many kids are at the beach now? Some arithmetic there. Too many for COVID-19. My friend had a preschool kid who drew a picture of two people and said, "Mummy, can you write 2 meters away from each other?" Which is pretty interesting that the pandemic and social distancing and everything has affected from the youngest through to the oldest. And it's going to have ripple effects on how we continue to live. Of course, it's changed how we work from home, what travel, what transport, what infrastructure we need, what more of, what we're using a bit less. But of course, we'll keep adapting now as things are perhaps returning to a new normal. But regardless, we need to be thinking about the future. We need to be thinking about these generations, not only the current generations that we have, but those who are coming through and will come into the future, like we just heard, having a vision to leave a legacy and actually leave a better city than one that we found for future generations, both with sustainability and also functionality. So we need to design for the future, and we'll hear about all sorts of automated vehicles and all sorts of things, I'm sure, in the days ahead. But I thought this was quite ahead of its time. We have a garage here, which is obviously for a flying car. So that one is really thinking ahead. We need to design for different demographic groups. We've got this one here, which is designed interesting slippery dip with some kind of hole at the bottom. Or we've got a disabled ramp, which probably is still a little bit dysfunctional there down the stairs. So we need to design for functionality as we're thinking through infrastructure and how people live. The spiral staircase that actually doesn't connect to the doors, or you've got an ATM machine that unless you're 8 foot tall you can't actually reach. We need to design for all the parts to work together, and of course in infrastructure it's not just about a road, but it's about all the parts that connect and all the pieces of infrastructure that people use in a day to make life function. This one was quite good. You could not quite use the fan once the projector got installed. We need to design with competence, and whether it be that you're painting the signs on the road and needed to use spell check, you need to measure twice, cut once, as this one, or as the "you had one job" memes show, it's good to just check we're putting that last tile in the right place. We need to design making the most of all the available spaces. And here's a classic example of maybe 0.5 of a bathroom, like you see on those real estate ads where it's 3.5 bathrooms, maybe that's the 0.5 right there. And design aesthetically, this one's quite good, a staircase with some perhaps looking like it's an escalator, but really just keeping you on your toes there. Goethe said this wonderful phrase, which I think is good for us to think when we're creating infrastructure for the future, that architecture is frozen music. It's something that's been created at a point in time and then literally frozen in time. So what you're designing and what you're creating and the products that you're using to do so and how you're building it is actually going to be a piece of artwork or music that freezes in time for future generations to use. And I think that that's a beautiful way of thinking about it as we design for the future, as we design for generations to come. What are we creating that is going to be really permanent for at least a couple of generations? So architecture is frozen music. We're going to look at 3 areas. We're going to look at, firstly, emerging demographics, and then the emerging customer, and also emerging solutions. So what's happening demographically? Well, in Australia we have about almost 26 million people. In New Zealand there's 5.1 million people. Both Australia and New Zealand have a growing and ageing population. However, in both of our countries we've seen the growth obviously reduced significantly with our border closures because a lot of our growth is normally from international migration, net overseas migration, and that's obviously slowed over the last number of years. Nonetheless, we are growing and we are ageing. We have 6 generations in our communities, and this is a bit of a snapshot. Sociologists will have slightly different years and slightly different labels because it's not some exact science, but it does help us understand what were the trends, what were the formative influences, what were the social and world events, what were the technologies that shaped that group of people who grew up at around the same time. So we have our builders generation born 1945 and before. We then have our baby boomers born 1946 to 1964. Do we have any builders or baby boomers in the room here today? Got some baby boomers? Fantastic. I think we're going to dominate on Gen X in the room. Have we got Gen Xers born 1965 to 1979? Fantastic. What about some fellow millennials or Gen Ys, 1980 to 1994? Hey, we're doing quite well. We used to get a bad rap that we wouldn't turn up till like lunchtime, but look at us here in the morning session. We've got our Gen Zs born 1995 to 2009. Have we got some Gen Zs? Wow, this is amazing. Fantastic cohort of Gen Zs in the room. What a great demographic mix we've got. And then Gen Alphas born 2010 to 2024. Unless there's some home from school today, probably not in this room, but they are our generation that are coming through, and perhaps we'll call them Generation Coronials because growing up with the coronavirus and being born in that time. I have a little 1-year-old and she's grown up obviously with the pandemic, very used to masks. She knows how to do hand sanitizer. I just, put it on her hand, she rubs it together. She's very familiar with FaceTime because that's the reality of how she's got to know a lot of her extended family over the last year or so. And so it's interesting, the run-on effects to how we live from some social and world events. So we're going to unpack a little bit more about the emerging generations as we go. But here's one thing that our maths teacher would tell us. You need to learn how to do this without a calculator because you won't be carrying one around in your back pocket everywhere you go. Were you told something like that? And now, of course, we carry such things everywhere. Gen Alpha are very savvy at knowing how to get information, but there's some things they won't know, like the unique relationship between these two items. Why you needed a pen or pencil when listening to a cassette tape just in case it got chewed. Gen Z really only know a world of Wi-Fi. They don't really remember the days of dial-up where you'd unplug the family phone line and you can get that good connection so that you could surf the web. And when you were surfing the web, it was using platforms like Netscape Navigator. Do you remember it? Looks something like this. And it's where your patience was a lot greater because these signs would come up. Estimated time left 39 years. Yes, our Gen Z friends, this is what we used to live through when we wanted just to do a simple thing on the internet, and we'd literally leave the room, make a cup of tea, come back in, and you were just happy if it was moving in the right direction. Remember? Sometimes it would go back the other way. It was like, oh gosh, now there's 54 years left, And so what's interesting though is in what was quite a short time how our customer expectations and staff expectations and society's expectations have rapidly increased. So you think about the simple delays we used to have that now are just not really acceptable for people. People want things now, they want them instant, they want them faster, they want them personalised. They want to know how they can travel from A to B seamlessly through apps using their smartphone, not having to get money out or do transactions or wait for connections. They want a seamless flow, and customer expectations have really increased rapidly over the last couple of years. So question for you at your tables, take 30 seconds and talk about how has infrastructure changed for your generation? Perhaps from when you were growing up to now, what changes have you seen in infrastructure in your generation? Over to you, take 30 seconds or so and have a chat. All right, excellent. I'll interrupt you there. I'd love just a couple of thoughts from the room, though, if we can all come back together. And would anyone just like to share what they were saying at their table to their colleagues? Any changes you've seen in infrastructure in your generation? Anyone like to just kick us off and share? Perhaps a yes?
Just a big one when we talk about opal cards or access cards to infrastructure.
Yes, opal cards. So you don't have to stop. Remember when you'd need to line up and buy that ticket and you knew that train was going to come in that 1 minute and then you missed the train, whereas opal cards just on and off, tapping on. So making that frictionless transaction for commuters. Absolutely. What else? Anything else? E-tags. Oh, yes, the old toll booths. And again, searching for loose change in your car. Again, smoother processes, removing barriers. Anything else? Yes. He said years ago in his home country they were trying to get rid of bicycles and now they're trying to bring them back. So, hey, we all on the path of learning. My pop talked about how plane travel absolutely transformed the whole way his generation even thought, or the concept that the world was connected in the way that it was just phenomenal for them. We're seeing changing demographics and the way that people are living. We're building bigger homes, but on smaller blocks than, say, even when the baby boomers were at the age that the millennials are now. We're more likely to live in medium or high density housing, and so we're seeing increase in people living in apartments and units, particularly this 25 to 34-year-old age group. Here, 1 in 5 aged 25 to 34 now live in an apartment. That's a 78% increase in the last 25 years of people living in apartments, and the more increase in numbers of stories and the like as well. So the way that we're living is changing. We have a changing population. We're growing, both in Australia and New Zealand. We're growing. This is Australia's population pyramids, looking back 3 decades now and then into 3 decades. So we're growing, but we're also aging. In both of our countries, we're aging. So in Australia, we've currently got 1 in 6 aged over 65, and that's likely to continue to increase. Will continue to increase. There's over 85s has increased 84,000 people in the last 5 years, between the last 5 year censuses that we have. How are we moving around? Well, this is how do we get to work? People aged over 15. Most people still use a car. This is, the green line is Sydney, the blue is New South Wales, and yellow is Australia, just to give you a bit of a picture there. So the majority of people still travel to work in a car. Roads are very important. Roads will continue to be very important. But you can also see a great opportunity to encourage people to travel, or can we make it more of a seamless transition for people to travel using public transport? What are the missing links? How do we actually get people? Because obviously, sustainably, if we are using public transport, it's far better for the environment than everyone in their cars. So just a few thoughts around our demographics and some impacts for infrastructure. So we have a growing and ageing population. So we need to think about that ageing population, because whilst we're building for future generations, we're also building for now. And so that ageing population will need better access, and just the fact that we'll have more people, our cities need to be able to handle a greater population. We've got higher density housing. So thinking about infrastructure to support this, particularly in our major cities where there's those clusters of high density housing now, what's the infrastructure around that? 1 in 6 are currently catching public transport to work. How can this be increasingly attractive and sustainable option for commuters? Just a couple of thoughts. Of course, there are many more. Who is the emerging customer? We've talked a little bit about Gen Z, and I've written this book, Hello Gen Z, where I've interviewed a whole lot of young people and asked them about how their world works. And as much as I thought I understood Gen Z, they taught me a whole lot more. I actually brought a few copies if you want one. They're just $20. Come and see me at the table at the end. But who is this emerging customer? Well, they've created a whole new language. And just to keep your brains in gear this morning, the last chapter of my book actually is a glossary on how to speak Gen Z. And I've got a few words up for you here. So at your tables, I'm going to give you 30 seconds and see if you can work out how to speak Gen Z. Now, none of these are swear words. I'm not referring to any swear words in any of those acronyms. But I want you to take 30 seconds. Can you work out any of these words? Over to you. Okay, let's do this together, and let's come back together. And of course, for our friends online, be making use of chat bars with these sorts of activities and staying engaged and interacting with people who are also in the online space. That would be great. Okay, how did we go? What do you think SOML is? Anyone? Call it out. Story of my life. Well done over here. Fantastic. What about NGL? Not gonna lie. NGL. Tea. Yes, spill the tea. Goss. Well done. So it's short for spill the tea, which is what's the goss. So it's not referring to morning tea breaks or Earl Grey. What about Rona? Coronavirus, of course. WUD? What are you doing? That's right. Points to this table here. IDEK. I don't even know. Well done. Salty. You're feeling a bit salty. You're feeling a bit cranky, irritable, moody. So that's what you can just say now. If you're just not in the mood for that Monday morning meeting, just say, I'm feeling salty. See how that goes down with your Gen Z. SMH. Sydney Morning Herald's always a good guess, but this one is shaking my head. And POS is not point of sale, and this one is parent over shoulder. So, or there's MOS, mum over shoulder, and the like. So they're very creative as a generation. They are creating a language faster than we can keep up with, and probably by the time I put it on a slide, it's so last month. So, I'm sorry if it doesn't fly with your Gen Zs at home. But what's pretty amazing is what they are. It's a global youth culture. So young people all around the world are creating these. It's because they've got shared internet, shared memes, shared social media spaces, YouTube celebrities. So they're sharing this social media world that is creating a global youth culture. They are a generation who like and increasingly expect convenience. And you think about how technology has rapidly improved in even their short lifetimes and how it's made life more convenient every step of the way. And so this convenience feeds their mentality as customers and consumers all the time. Surely it can be faster, it can be quicker, it can be better, it can be more personalised, it can work for me. When they want to find out something, they just say, you just Google it. In the past, you'd call grandma and ask how that worked, or you'd wait for dad to come home from work and ask for his help with something. Now you just Google it. And I think this is how Brooke summed it up. For school, I just Google it. Why go to my textbook? What's the point of flicking through 10 pages in a textbook when I could just Google it? The burden of the 10-page flick. And I thought it was quite funny when Brooke said that to me, but literally she was just being serious. She's like, oh, that's so slow. And I found that Siri has become the new homework companion for many of these young people. So they will just ask Siri, what's the answer? They told me Google gives you too many words, so I just ask Siri and I write down what she says. So voice commands, they will have no problem adapting to using robots as an assistant at work when they're there, because they're already using this kind of technology even in primary school. Others said to me, oh, you just watch a YouTube video and there's extraordinary amounts of YouTubes uploaded every minute, and it's also a way that we can retain information and get information more quickly when it's in visual form. So again, if you're trying to connect with customers, consumers, there is a huge amount of noise out there, so it can be hard to get cut through, but at the same time, video can be a format that people can go and rewatch, quickly understand how it works, how your product works, what sustainability outcomes you've got by using that product, or whatever it might be, can be a great platform to embrace. Others said, oh, I'd ask mum or dad, but as Maddie said, oh, they'd say just Google it. So you're kind of back around here. Matt said I Google it. Maybe read the first couple of links that Google gives me. I never go past the first page of Google, though. That's about it. That's like this meme that says you now know you're desperate for an answer when you look at the second page of Google. That's now really in-depth research to click that next button. Talking about cut-through and how hard it is to get, I've got a little activity for you. So I want you to call out what is the colour I've written this word in, not what the word is. Okay, so what colour is it? Green. Okay, so I've got a list of them, and I just want you to call out what colour it's written in. Okay, here we go. Yeah, it hurts your brain, doesn't it? And you're trying to filter out all this noise to be, or other information to be able to get to the answer. And I feel like that's what it's like now, actually, with just trying to get people to focus, or trying to get cut through with your message, or trying to get engagement with sometimes the emerging generation who have just so much stimulus going on. And so we do need our messaging to be clear, and we need it to be consistent, and we need to really be constant in the messaging that we want our customers to understand, whether it's that you're leading in sustainable outcomes, or that the way that travel is changing, or the way that infrastructure is changing, or whatever it is, because there's so much noise out there, it can be harder to get that cut through. They're growing up as a generation who are no longer memorising just in case you need to know that information in 10 years' time. So my parents' generation learnt so many things at school because that's how school works. It was, oh, you might need to know this one day. Whereas this generation are growing up thinking, why would I do that? I just need to be able to access the information just in time. And again, people as commuters, as users of transport, for example, expect not to have, the booklet where they've looked up what time on Wednesdays the train comes. They expect I arrive at a station, or I'm arriving somewhere, where is it, where can I go, how quickly, when will this be here, all live, everything, again, frictionless and in their hand and convenient. So accessing just in time. They're also very collaborative. So you think about the encyclopedias that we used when we were at school. It looks something like this, volumes of them, written by the experts. And you'd go and you'd get that right one and you'd write down what they said. Well, the encyclopedia this generation are growing up with looks more like this. It's something, not only is it the difference between print and digital, but the thing about this one is it's written by the collaborative, collective community. So they themselves can change and contribute the encyclopedia. Again, this taps into that they're used to having a voice. And they have had a voice from a very young age, whether it be that they're able to change the global encyclopedia, or they're able to create a YouTube video, or use social media, or whatever it might be. I think that when we understand them as customers, they also want to be able to give feedback. And if we have an open line of feedback for our products and our services, and then we will probably get some great ideas and real life feedback from our customers. Whereas if we don't have it, don't worry, they'll still vent, but it will be in a different place, or perhaps on social media or somewhere else. And so we can open up the conversation and actually collaborate with our emerging generations and get some great ideas about how do we build sustainably, how could it be better, how could that service work more effectively and the like. So having that open communication can be great. Leadership styles have changed from traditional hierarchical top-down ladder-like approaches to the style that the emerging generations will best connect with, and if you've got them in your teams, think about collaborative leadership styles. So it's not so much that you're the leader, so therefore you need to come up with every idea and you need to make every decision. But it's actually identifying the gifts and the skills and the talents in each and every person in your team, letting a culture be there where people can share ideas and come up with solutions and have ownership over problems, even if they're only been around for a couple of days or a couple of months or whatever it might be, and drawing out the best out of your team and then facilitating that. That's a collaborative leadership model, and you'll find, no doubt, that it gets much better engagement with the younger people as well as all the generations, because at the end of the day, we all want to make a worthwhile contribution. We all want to be able to share ideas and feel like we can be part of the solution. So think about collaborative rather than just that being told or that top-down approach, which is possibly how you grew up through your organisation, but there's been a real shift in how people live, how they work, how they connect, and this will help you engage them. Well, people are using online. The world's now spending over 10 billion hours a day using social media, which is quite a frightening thought. How much of our lives goes to scrolling? Young people are spending about 2.7 hours a day on social media. A quarter say they're just constantly connected. Again, can we make use of these spaces to collaborate or to provide information or connect with our customers? There's a lot of unwritten rules, though, about how to use these spaces. So here's what Lauren explained to me about texting. Texting rules. You cannot send a sentence with a full stop at the end because you look mad. Or K dot for okay because you look angry, like I'm done with you. A dot, it's like don't talk to me, I got my point across but I don't want to reply because I dotted you. Yes, so for punctuation and grammar for baby boomers means something totally different to our Gen Zs who feel like you're rude, you're cutting them off, you don't want a reply and you're dotting them. And so what they're doing is actually making up for what's lost in the non-verbal cues that we get in face-to-face communication. All the tone and the body language, which you don't have over this sort of platform, they make up for it with all these other ways. Like, they won't just write okay full stop. They'd write okay, y, smiley. Because that's like, okay, I'm happy, yeah, great. Not just, okay. So they are quite, again, they're creative and they're innovative and they're creating a new way of communicating through these platforms. And I found that it's quite helpful to have a Gen Z on your team who understands this world of social media because there's so many unwritten rules. And if we want to communicate with customers and build rapport and understand the needs of the future generations, the best way is to get maybe a little advisory team of Gen Zs or some group of Gen Zs or younger generations around you who can help explain how this world's working, because it changes faster than we probably realise, and for them it's an integrated part of their life and it's a language that they know how to speak in a different way. Having said all that, they also are looking for real connection, and again in your teams think about this. How does your team create a collaborative culture but also meaningful relationships? They will be the first to tell you that, as Matt said, we're losing the ability to have a conversation face to face. Andrew said it appears well on the outside, but we're longing for emotional connection. We're connected, yet lonely, aware, yet lazy. There's a lack of face-to-face interaction due to social media. And so while social media is fantastic at connecting us broadly, it does a poor job at connecting us deeply and with real relationships. And so understanding that if we can create a culture in our teams that has real relationships and where we care about one another, that goes a really long way to engagement. As customers, it's this, I guess, convenience side of things. They've grown up with things like Netflix, which is about experience on demand. I want what I want when I want it. So my nephew was going to go to the movies with his dad, and his dad said, okay, we'll go in a couple of hours when it's on. And my nephew said, but I'm ready now. And he said, yeah, but it's not on now. What do you mean it's not on now? Because he'd grown up with Netflix, which is just ready when you are, and you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait a week for the next episode. You just have it at your fingertips. I heard a story of some preschool kids who were building a cubby house, and one said, we'll put the kitchen here, and another kid said, we don't need a kitchen, we'll just get Uber Eats. At preschool age. So this mentality of convenience, but also showing a different way that we live and understanding, well, what is it going to look like in a generation's time or in 2 generations' time? How might we be living? What will the impact of technology be? How do we still create meaningful places and help people connect? Because there's some human needs which aren't going to go away, and the need for people knowing people, connecting with one another, real relationships, real community will be more important than ever in a world that perhaps goes more digital and the like. We still need to create meaningful connections and places for people. So thinking about what are the human needs that we will continue to have, and what are the ways that we'll live differently that we can facilitate. Disruption and innovation will continue to affect how we work, how we build, how we live, how we create infrastructure. An example of disruption was the CD that actually was so disruptive it basically wiped out the need for LPs and cassette tapes. And the music industry boomed as a result of this. And I feel like we can be like the CD. We've innovated, we've changed, we've seen growth. Like, okay, great, are we there? But can we just keep going like this now, and then something like this happens in our industry? Spotify, you don't even have a tangible product anymore. It's just streaming anything, anywhere. And again, total disruption to the music industry. So the same thing can keep happening, and no doubt will keep happening in infrastructure and in building and how we do things. And so being open to change. As we've been hearing about Opal cards and e-tags, frictionless transactions, and making life smoother, faster, connected for people will continue to be a priority for this generation as well. Climate change is obviously a key cause that young people care about. Tatiana said, this generation is smart. We 100% believe that climate change is prevalent, and we want you to see that. They want to be part of a solution for that. The strength of our generation is the ability to recognise global problems like climate change and try to act upon them. I think you're in an exciting space to attract not only customers and clients in the community, but also staff around this messaging around sustainability and being part of a solution for a sustainable future is right in the passion area of many Gen Zs. There's all sorts of innovations around, like Husky Cups, which use the coffee husks, which were just creating a whole lot of rubbish, and turned it with a resin into a coffee cup that could be used. They care about things being environmentally sustainable, things that are making a difference back in the world, like the Thank You products, which by buying that product, it's then the profits are going to helping sanitisation or helping in the developing world. And so your everyday customer decisions making a difference in the world. They love things like that. So how can we be thinking like this into the future? I don't usually bother with particular brands, although I do try to avoid brands that I know aren't cruelty-free. So they do want to make a difference with their purchasing decisions and lifestyle decisions, but sometimes it's not really clear to them how they can make those differences. 7 in 10 Gen Z Aussies have an ambition to buy their own home, but what will they be looking for? One of the big things they will be looking for is the sustainability. Climate change is the number one concern for Gen Z, so eco-sustainable housing or infrastructure around that, using all these materials, which of course you are well across, but it will continue to be a priority for these generations. So some opportunities, some ideas here around the impacts for infrastructure. Think about human-centred design. I know there's so much to do, and I know these projects are massive, and managing these projects would, be spreadsheets and everything that you're trying to handle, but let's remember to always bring it back to people. because you actually are shaping cities, you are shaping the way people are going to live, not just now but into future generations. So human-centred design, real people in real situations are using what you're building. Listen to and collaborate with emerging generations and get them on board about building now for future generations. And attract staff through sustainability messaging. There's a huge opportunity in your sector to do that, and I encourage you to make sure you get that message out there loud and clear what you're doing, because I think it really aligns with what they care about. Of course, a few thoughts around emerging solutions. You would know about smart cities and the Internet of Things working with infrastructure and working with our cities. Barcelona's quite a good example of this. They have 22 programs in their city where they're trying to make it more sustainable and make life better. So they've got, for example, a sensor network that analyses the city, and it can feed into different things. They've got an LED lighting system, so when there's a pedestrian who's walking down the street, the lights come on, making it safer for that pedestrian or for that car, but also saving huge amounts of energy when there's no movement. The smart waste disposal systems, which alert the garbage when the garbage is getting to a more full point, so they're not just being emptied when they don't need to. They're reducing the numbers of trucks going around all the time, and they've also got some things where it goes underground. You've got this smart irrigation system, which measures the humidity and the water in the air and what we've had, what rainfall they've had, so that it only waters the green spaces in the city when it needs it. So on a week like this automatic sprinklers wouldn't be going on. But on weeks where it's dry, they would be. So again, it's saving huge amounts on water as a result of this. Car, traffic and parking management. One of those things that is a pain point for everyone in big cities is finding a car spot. This gives you the whole of the roads have sensors under them, and so similar to the car parks that show a green light when there's a free spot in that aisle. Well, this shows you on your app where there's a free spot on the street. So you're not then just driving around and around and around blocks trying to find spots. You just look on the app, where's the spot? Oh, great, there's some spots there. I'll just drive straight there. So again, saving congestion, frustration, time, and all the emissions of wasted time sitting in traffic looking for car spots. So there's so many opportunities. Of course, they're just a couple of ideas, not completely extensive, but it's an exciting time to be in infrastructure when you connect it with the technologies that are available and the possibility of future generations. So create a vision for emerging generations about being sustainable consumers. As much as Gen Z will talk to you about wanting to make a difference in the world and caring about climate change, at the same time, if it's more convenient, they'll probably at times just go, I'll just get an Uber rather than a bus because that's convenient, which is also a strong mentality in their generation. And so if they understand, hey, if I made that decision to catch that bus then, or if I made that decision to use that then, that would be making a difference. So creating messaging around it and helping them understand their impacts. Future-proof design, how will we use infrastructure in the future, and integrate smart city solutions. I'd love you to just take 30 seconds and talk to someone at your table about one takeaway that you can go away and think about. Maybe it's just that you want to spend some time thinking about how we can integrate smart city solutions or whatever it might be. One takeaway, maybe it's about your teams and how you're going to create a more collaborative culture in your teams for the emerging generations, or use social media differently, whatever it is. One thought, one idea, one takeaway from this so far. Over to your tables. Take 30 seconds to talk to someone around you.
Do the Q&A. Yep.
One slide. That we're running ahead of time.
You work much better. Really.
All right, fantastic. I'll get you to come back together there. Hopefully, if you're online, you've been still brainstorming or sharing some thoughts in the chat there. All right, I'll just get a couple of thoughts from the room just to hear where people are thinking, what kinds of areas you're going to go home and implement or think on further. What were we talking about? Who'd like to just share? We'll just get a couple of quick ideas. Yes. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, excellent. So when we're thinking about diversity and inclusion, one area to think about is the different generations and the younger generations in the mix as well, because actually they will give you insights about the emerging customer. That's what we've got to understand. Yes, wow, they might think differently, and oh my goodness, engaging Gen Z staff, do we really have to do all this around culture and around this and change our leadership style? Yes, it's a bit of work, but actually it will position your business to understand where your customer is heading as well. So you'll get a lot more out of it than you perhaps realise. Okay, any other thoughts? Over here, and I think we've got a microphone going to run your way.
I was only going to share that I think the way we engage with communities and generations when we consult on major projects is still geared to older generations rather than younger generations in terms of how they want to consume information, how we do town halls, how we do that. So I know we're trying different in that space, a lot of remote working last year, open up live streams compared to what we've done in the past, but I think there's a lot more work we could do to understand how we engage with those emerging generations when we're consulting.
Excellent. And consulting with different generations will look different. So it might not be that they come to a focus group or a meeting in a local community hall, but gosh, they'll tell you their thoughts on social media if you ask. So thinking differently about what consultation looks like and how do we engage them. Love that. All right, one more. Anything else?
Don't make me run too fast.
Anyone on the outside of the room? Just kidding. Anywhere. One other thought, or we can head over to Q&A, I believe. So, well, thank you very much. Actually, one final thought for you is just that Gen Z, as you engage them in your team, this is what Oliver said. I think our attention span is extremely short, and anything that catches our eye distracts us with so much stuff going on. I think it might be a bit difficult when we get jobs. Oliver, I think you're onto something, but I've also found them to be a very creative, amazing generation who, if you can engage their hearts, not just their hands, they will do add an amazing contribution to your team and not be just like the person who couldn't be bothered moving the stick to paint the side of the road here. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Claire. Now comes the big test. Do you remember when Haley told you how to put your questions up? So if you can go to them, please, and we'll moderate some questions for you. I'm a war boom baby, and I was a little upset when you sort of attacked us as you did. Technology for me, Alan Zettinger was my mate. He lived next door. Technology for us was a piece of string and two tin cans, and it had little washers on the end. We pulled it hard, and it rang. And Alan would pull his end tight, and I pull my end tight, and we talked to each other through the can. And we thought it's got to improve that technology. So we got two pieces of string and two cans. One we spoke through and one we listened to. And it was fine.
Well, there you go. I love it. Innovation, baby boomers, all the way.
I'll take the first question if I may. And it follows on from what we just heard over there. It's a very famous architectural firm in Italy that for generations has always insisted on the team comprising of architects, landscape architects, artists, and philosophers and psychologists. Everybody with an equal say. About 4 years ago, they were told maybe they should also invite a young person onto it. It was a step too far. How do you get over that boundary? How do you get to people to go, well, yes, invite, but just not in social media or just do a research project on them, actually get them into the room?
Yeah, I think it's when we understand that they are going to have insights that help us understand the emerging customer and that they could be actually one of the missing pieces for your strategic picture or for your product delivery or what it might be, then I think we can really harness that and embrace it rather than just thinking, oh gosh, they're so empowered or they think they know everything or whatever it might be. They're willing to contribute. Yes, they've been empowered with technology and yes, they'll come across differently to maybe how your generation did, but give them an opportunity and get them engaged and I think you will not look back at having their input in your team. So you can even just make a little team of Gen Zs and get their thoughts on different projects or start building a little bank of Gen Z customers who are giving you some feedback. So just don't be afraid of listening and learning from them. Think about learning up and down, cross-generational mentoring. There's so much that will actually help us if we listen to them.
No, I don't seem to have any other questions up here. Is it my fault? Am I not? Do we need a tin can and a piece of string?
Yes, let's get your tin can. Did you bring it today?
Any questions from the audience? Let's just shout them out. I'm sure we can dispense with this for a bit. Does anybody have a question? No? Well, I'd like to ask one more while you think about questions. It seems to me that the younger generation I deal with, I work with a high school on a number of media training stuff. They are incredibly politically aware. You spoke also about being aware of sustainability. Can they really articulate what they want out of infrastructure?
I do find it, like you say, they're very aware. And if you think about the access to information they've had and the collaborative nature of being able to communicate with other people, all around the world about issues, if you can. There will be a lot that they actually are informed about, and of course there'll be gaps as well. But if we can build off where they're interested, so it could be climate change or it could be making a difference in the world or whatever, and then say, okay, this is how infrastructure needs to work. These are the things, and get them as part of the problem solvers. I think that they'll be on your team. They'll come alive with that. So they will be aware, but of course, there'll be some knowledge gaps as well at their age. Yeah.
So they can always Google before the meeting. Kerry asked this question: how do we use the learning? Forgive me, it's very small print. I'm old. How do we use this learning to support vulnerable communities better?
Again, I think it comes to listening and considering the different communities and. People have different resources available, obviously, and so with our vulnerable communities or, where they don't have the resources or they need extra support, it's really thinking through, if you were in their shoes, what would you need to get from A to B? How would you need to live? What would take away the pain points? Because it might just be some simple little tweaks that you make in your plan that make a world of difference to a vulnerable community or a group of people. So it's, an example is even just thinking about ageing population or thinking about people in wheelchairs or thinking, and what would really make that just work for them. And sometimes it's not a major overhaul, it's just a little tweak and it changes people's lives. So I think it's listening and it's thinking about people-centred, human-centred design before we just tick all the boxes and build.
And here's another question. What are the top tips for implementing cultural change in an organisation?
Culture is your lived reality. So it's what people experience. It's not just what your vision statement on the wall is. And so, again, I think it comes to being intentional in what you allow to replicate. Whatever you allow as a leader will replicate. So, for example, if you have a culture where someone walks out of a room or in a meeting, it's like their ideas are pulled down or there's backstabbing or there's gossip going on, I can guarantee that's what's going to replicate. But if you have a culture where people are free to come up with ideas and ideas are encouraged and validated, thanks, that's a great idea, hadn't thought of that. Doesn't mean you have to put every idea into practice, but people feel like they're valued, then that's what's going to replicate. So as a leader, you've got to be very intentional. It's like gardening. What weeds are growing up, and we'll pull out those weeds. We won't allow those things to grow in our culture. We need to be very intentional about what we plant, and you need to be consistently on it. I've got a whole lot in my book about organisational culture, but I think it's one of those most powerful things. It's invisible, but it's transformational and incredibly powerful. So it's worth putting the effort in to getting a great organisational culture and maintaining it.
Heidi has a good question. What advice do you have for Gen Z to cope with other gens?
Well, it goes whatever way you look at it. We've got some really different ways of thinking, different expectations, different ways we've grown up, approaches to work, whatever generation you're in. And I think it's about making each generation feel valued and being humble to learn from other generations. So my pop, although he grew up seeing the refrigeration come in and seeing all these things, by the end of his life he was there using iPhones so that he could connect with his grandkids. He was incredibly humble and he was a learner. And I think that whether we're a Gen Z or whether we're a builder, it's to be humble and to continue to learn and realise we might know some things and we might be able to teach some things, but there's a whole lot that we also can learn from others. And if you get that dynamic right in your teams, multi-generational, cross-generational mentoring, I think it can be a real strength.
The questions are coming in rapidly now, but we only have time for one more, I'm afraid, so I do apologise for that. There is a massive disconnect between the privileged and underprivileged. How do we ensure that their voices are heard and the needs are met regardless of how and when they communicate?
It's being aware that our society is made up, and it's great. It's stronger because of the diversity of us, whether it's that we're richer or poorer or from a different cultural background or younger or older or whatever it might be, and that if we can actually lift the tide for everyone, the whole society benefits. And so it is really being considerate of people who are in more challenging circumstances in everything we go about.
I just want to thank you very much, and if you wouldn't mind also thanking Claire for her presentation.
Thank you so much.